Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to 10 Scale Adventures live at the bench for episode 2 on the 1K giveaway build, which, if you recall from last time, we made it to here. Not very far. We did put the axles together. So I'm found some issues with that. So we're going to start the upgrade process. Before I go too far, it looks like I have good audio. I changed up the studio a little bit for this, for here going forward, made some upgrades to the shelving units behind me for all my RC storage. I've been working on the audio, which you can kind of see the mic right up here. I think that's in a little bit better spot, and the filters on it seem to be working better, at least from what I can tell. So hopefully that things sound good, look good. We got a little bit better lighting. I've been working on that a little bit, trying to make the streams a little bit more enjoyable to watch. So yeah, before I get started on this though, I do want to put a shout out to my buddy Neil. He sent me a few things this week that came in the mail, and I don't know what they are, but I think it's incentive for doing a comp build for Scale Nationals next year. So we'll go ahead and dig into that real quick before we get started on the 1K build. So here it is. Here's the box from my buddy Neil. He sent this out here. I haven't opened it. I don't know what's in it. But I do know that him and Jake have been working tediously on comp trucks, and we've been talking about Scale Nats a lot. So maybe, just maybe, this is the incentive for me to build a real comp truck instead of taking a TF2 to Scale Nationals for Class 1. I will apologize up front. If we do lose the stream tonight, it's probably because of weather. We have a storm over the top of us right now, and it's had some thunder and some lightning. So far, no signs of losing power, but it is possible. So if we lose the stream, I apologize. We'll blame the weather. Jake, you're going to be very happy with this package. Oh yeah, Neil, you did make it just in time. And hopefully we'll be, I know I'll be happy with it. It's RC goodies. So the first item is here. Mind you, for anybody who's ever buys anything from my buddy Neil and he's got to ship it, killer job on the packaging. This box didn't have any rattles to it at all. Everything's wrapped really nice. If you're ever shipping RC parts, anybody, pack your stuff really well. It pays off in stuff making it to the new owner without issues. Oh snap! Look at that. I already know I'm happy. Look at that. Let me switch cameras here. All right. That is a Vanquish Curry axle. Offset front. That's going to pair very nicely with a VFD. Knuckles, the whole works. It'll need internals, but that's okay. We can make that happen. I'm already happy. Neil, do I need to go any further in this box? Good Lord. That's going to... I foresee a very nice build in my future. And, of course, the matching rear axle housing. We got a set of Vanquish front and rear axle housings. And we got the front axle shafts to match for the offset housing. Right on. And last but not least in here, not last but not least, we also got a ProLine sticker. I don't know if that one was intentional or not. That may have just been left over in the box, but I'll take it either way. And we also got a Holmes Hobbies BRXL speed controller. That's a brushed ESC speed controller. These are supposed to be pretty fantastic. I don't have any currently, so this will be an awesome new piece to work with. Neil, you are the man, and no doubt this is encouragement to build a real comp class 1 rig. I hate you and love you at the same time, because now I got to build a truck worthy, or a chassis worthy of these axles. Oh yeah, polish them up, make them nice. I think that should be doable. We I don't know. I don't know if we'll polish them or if we'll leave the rash on them that is so rightfully earned from your rigs, because I've seen what those rigs can do, and I've been pretty happy with it. Are these the ones that were on the Comanche? I'm sure there's a little bit of delay here, but I'm sure. Oh yeah, the power pin's out for a so Neil is saying that he pulled the power pin on this, and for anybody who doesn't know why you would do that or what he's talking about there on the chat, the power pin here from the servo controller has been removed from the servo connector, or from the JST connector, and pulled back. You do this when you're running an external back. So good to know that the pin's still intact, man. I'll probably run an external back because I usually do anyway. So that's just, saves me one step in the build. But man, that's going to be exciting. Time to rewrite the plan for the next sets of episodes to see if we can start the build that these are going to be on. Definitely time to plan. You are the man. Thank you so much. You're definitely on the IOU list, no doubt at this point. That's a hard one to top. We'll go ahead and move these off to the side. All right. So the 1K giveaway build, for anybody who hasn't that's watching this video and hasn't become aware of what this is, the 1K giveaway build that I have here is a build that I've started that when the channel hits 1,000 subscribers and the Facebook page also hits 1,000 followers, this truck is going to be given away at no cost to whoever it goes to, unless it ends up with some international shipping, and I'll work with whoever that is to accommodate that if we can do it. If it's in the lower 48 of the US, I'm even going to cover the shipping cost of getting this build out to somebody. The plan for this build is going to reveal itself as we progress through building this truck. Man, I am excited about those axles. They're just sitting here looking pretty. I don't even care that there's scuffs on them. It's the first set of Vanquish axles that I own. So, but yeah, so this is going to go out to someone at no cost, and it's ideally, depending on how long it takes for the channel to reach 1,000 subscribers, it'll be my goal is for it to be a complete, ready to run, well-built truck. That could either just be a trail use truck, or if you wanted to go to competition type stuff and do some sort of competition, it'll be a class 1 build, because those are my favorite to build. So since I'm going to build it to give it away, I'm going to build something that I would like if I was receiving it. The point that we made it to, your roommate's moving in, active in the chat in a few. Oh yeah, for sure, man. You know where to find me. I'll be here. So the point we made it to on the chassis not last week, it was a month ago. The episodes on this are probably going to be about once a month, between getting parts, planning stuff out, and doing some other content in between. But the point we made it to was more or less the chassis with all the cross members are in. It does have a Trio aluminum skid on it. It's got aluminum bumper mounts front and rear. This cross member at the rear is plastic, and it still has a stock plastic front cross member. For the time being, those will stay intact as they are. There's a chance that this front cross member may have to change depending on what body I end up going with to detail this out. And there's a few other things I'm considering and kicking around for what might happen up on the front of this chassis. And then we've got the stock style. They're not quite skid plates, but they are skids, sliders, I guess, or just chassis trays, whichever way you want to refer to them. So then we also built the axles, the front and rear axles. And if you recall, there was a little bit of a challenge putting these together. There's definitely some scuffs. There was some, I don't remember if it was the front or the rear axle. One of them had some hang up in the actual axle tube with putting the axle shaft in. But we did load them up with all new bearings, and everything in them does spin nice, fully assembled. So, and the last thing we did was started to mess with the links that were in the box of junk, and basically the links are junk. The rod ends were worn out. The pivot balls on the rod ends are worn out. They're sloppy. They're the thin, cheap RTR metal links that Axial did that they're just not ideal. So, and then the other problem we ran into is that the pivot balls that were in these didn't fit in this skid properly. And that's about where I called it quits. I was like, okay, I know that there's some upgrades that need to happen to this. I'm not going to force it together on this junk when I know I'm going to be replacing it. So what we're doing today is we're going to do the first round of upgrade parts before we ever even get to a roller chassis. For that, I went to SSD and got new axle housing kits for both the front and rear axles. You can do both of these with the same kit. Using just this one kit, you can get two of these and do both front and rear axle housings. Because of the way these axles are designed, the axle tubes work interchangeably. But I decided to go with a rear end specific axle housing, which when we get to doing the rear end, I'm going to start with the front axle. When we get to the rear axle, I'll show you what's special about the rear end specific SSD Pro 44 axle housing. So we'll put that one off to the side, and let's go ahead and tear down the front axle so that we can dig into the new parts bag and play with some new stuff. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the junky links that are still on here that we messed with last time. These will go into the miscellaneous parts to get rid of box. Unfortunately, hopefully everybody who's watching got a chance to get out and play with their tiny trucks this weekend. Not sure how the weather was across the different places that are all watching. I know up in Oregon yesterday, it was some spotty rain in the area where I used to live because there was a big car show yesterday, full-size car show, hot rod stuff in Junction City, Oregon. That was one of my regular go-tos up until this year. Well, actually up until last year when COVID canceled it. And then this year not living there anymore, it wasn't an option for me to go. But I still keep in contact with some people who did go to the event, and it was off and on rainy. So I don't know how many people got out and did tiny trucking yesterday. The weather today, at least out here in Oklahoma yesterday and today, was absolutely gorgeous for the most part up until about an hour ago when a storm rolled in overhead and just started dumping rain. But glancing out the window, looks like the rain has come to a little bit of a halt for now. So maybe maybe that's passed and we're safe on not losing the internet stream tonight. So, all right, last screw and these links will be off. One thing I am going to do in this conversion is the SSD housing kit does not come with bearings. So all the new bearings that went into this axle are going to go right back into the SSD axle housing. The one nice thing is that axle housing does come with all new hardware. So all the hardware that's in this axle holding it together goes, well, it'll go right back into this housing without the guts. All we really need out of this axle is the guts that are inside it. Get rid of the link mounts. So the link mounts that are on here, the SSD kit does not come with link mounts. You can use the ones that are these factory ones that are on these stock axles, the bolt-on, the bolt-on link mounts. You can use these on the SSD housings. They'll mount right up. I don't have replacements yet, but I am going to replace them. So we won't be putting these onto the nice new housings. Those are a little bit too rough, not really worthy of a nice build that's going to be a giveaway. Get the diff cover off. I'm actually kind of grateful to myself that I didn't put all the hardware in everything on this axle. Not sure if it was because I couldn't find it, which that's a high probability, or if it was I was thinking ahead to save myself some time tearing the axle back apart. So is there, I know Neil has used the SSD housing kits before. Is there anybody else? Well, Jake, have you used if you're still watching, have you used the SSD housings before? Probably take him a quick minute to reply. I wonder how much of a delay there is from when I say something to when it comes through on the YouTube side. Never actually tested that. I probably should. It'll make a lot more sense when I ask a question and then get a reply later and have already forgotten what I asked. Oh, Lance. Oh, you have the you've got the diamonds on both ears. I thought about doing the diamonds for this one. From what I understand, the diamonds are a little bit nicer housing as far as performance. The shape of the diff. There you go. It was this axle, not to switch topics, but it was this axle that had, you can see, I mean, there's a good catch right here in the axle housing that hangs up on the shaft when it's going through. Didn't seem to have any issue with rotational drag. I think it's just a little bit wider spot on the axle shaft. Yeah, so what Lance talking about is the differential housing on the diamonds. So that the SSD axle kits, the axle tubes, and the pumpkin at the center are separate components. They're not a one-piece housing in the center of the way these axial ones are. So the axle tubes between the SSD diamond axles and the SSD Pro 44, the actual housing tubes are exactly the same. It's just the pumpkin that's different. So you can interchangeably use those. I went with the Pro 44s for the look. I think the diamonds are a little bit better of from a performance standpoint because of the shape of the housing. I think it slides over rocks and stuff a little bit better. It doesn't has a little bit less of a jagged edge on the front of it because of the shape of the housing. So that would be the benefit of using the diamonds over the Pro 44. But I like the look of the Pro 44, so that was why I went with them. I think they've got a real good scale look to them. Oh yeah, the diamonds, they do. They're very similar to the Curries. All right, we're gonna pop bearings out. Actually, I won't pop all of them out yet. Let's get into the goodie bag, and we'll take bearings out and put them right back in, so I don't have to try and figure out which ones go where. there it is. You saw it on camera. I just cut it open. These are fresh, brand new parts, never used. And assuming all goes right with doing this giveaway build, they will never get used by me. It'll go brand new with these brand new, not a scratch on them, to their new owner. All right, get rid of that. And check that out. Not too bad. SSD has a nice little instruction set that looks pretty clear, concise on how to do these. That's always a bonus when you're getting new parts, to have good, clear instructions. So we'll go ahead and keep those out as reference. I don't think I'm going to need them, but hey, you never know. And then we've got a hardware baggie. So all fresh hardware in there for this. The axle tubes are individually packaged. The tubes are aluminum, and then you have the carrier or the differential or the pumpkin, whatever. Well, not differential, that's what would be inside, if it was actually differential, but this is a locked. And then we'll open this guy up. The pumpkin housing for the Pro 44s comes with 2 different diff covers. So the ring and pinion, or the ring gear, actually has these metal clamps, these retainer clamps that hold the ring gear into the housing. And then you have the nylon housing. And it comes with this diff cover, which has a very stock type look to it. And it also comes with this diff cover, which has like an added rock guard type look to the bottom of it. So that's pretty cool. I think I am going to use the rock guard style diff cover on here, mainly because that one doesn't have screws along the bottom, and then so that should hang up a little bit less than the one with the screws on the bottom. Lance, did you get the SSD rear axle with the longer tubes as well? No, I did. The SSD rear axle that I've got for this is the rear specific axle that doesn't use the lockouts from the AR-44. It's the full length axle tube, which I did that for the same reason that I did Pro 44s, is it's going to look to get that more scale look. So I intentionally got the rear end specific housing and not the matching style housing for the one that's in this front, or the one that I'm going to use in the front, because I wanted to eliminate those lockouts out of there. And for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about there, when we get to the rear end here in a little bit, you can see exactly what the difference is with removing those lockouts in that SSD rear end specific housing. It's a pretty neat deal that they did. So in my opinion, it is a worthwhile upgrade for any AR-44 axle set on an SCX-10, especially at the price point. Both the standard axle housing that I just opened up and the rear end axle housing kits, each one of them is $25. So you're $50 to get a full axle housing set that has aluminum tubes with nylon centers. And it's a really nice piece. It gives it more of a scale look, and it's a nice little upgrade with a little bit of extra weight built in down in the axle with those aluminum tubes. Yeah, exactly, Lance. It definitely, I think it's definitely going to be a way better look, eliminating those lockouts on the back. It'll make the axle look a lot more scale. All right. Yeah, those are some pretty nice parts. I'm actually impressed. So I think, if I remember right, when SSD first released these kits, they didn't have the aluminum tubes. They only had plastic tubes. But they've since, at some point a while back, I mean, the 10.2's been out for a while, and they do all kinds of stuff for the 10.2. but at some point they added the aluminum tube option. And these are actually really nicely machined. The quality on them looks fantastic. So, and then the one I'm using for the front uses the same style C hub on the end of the axle tube as the factory one. And that's something that I really like about the SCX-10-2 axles, the AR44 axle, is that clockable hub on there that allows you to optimize that pinion angle and the inclination angle or caster angles of the front end to get the most out of your steering and keep that pinion angle optimized. So really nice stuff. Oh, starting to pile up new baggies. We'll toss those. Get the other axle tube out. There we go. So, and on this standard kit, it is a center diff setup still. So you're if you do this set configure or housing swap on any standard SCX-10, the nothing has to change with your link lengths, your shock positions. None of that has to change to do this swap. It all stays the same. The differential stays in the center. There is an offset housing. You can get the kit for the offset housing is a bit more expensive because you have to get axle shafts too. And I think they only do it with the diamonds as a complete kit. I think yeah, the diamonds, to get a complete kit with the offset diff, you have to do the diamond axles, which aren't bad. They have a very similar shape to the Curry axles. So the axle tubes will go in like that on either side, and now we have a housing that is. Oh, we need to pull the C hubs off of here because we're going to need those. Got to come all the way. Even if I didn't need them, I would need the bearings at minimum. But we do need these C hubs. I don't have new ones yet. Hint, hint. More upgrade parts in the future. These C hubs look pretty nice, so we may or may not replace them. They don't look like they're too abused. But an aluminum C hub might not be too bad on here either. Give it that real nice clean look. Need those. And we need bearings. I think that'll get it out. There we go. Oh, that popped in super nice. Definitely a good fit. Trying to lose the bearings. The fitment on these is just perfect. Drops in flush, nice, and couldn't ask for it to be machined better than that. And that is a machined aluminum tube, not a cast aluminum tube. All right. I guess I should put the screws in that keep the axle tube attached to the pumpkin. Each axle tube is attached to the pumpkin with 3 screws. Yep, and they're showing it with 3. Good, I'm not misspeaking. So yeah, it's 3 screws in each axle tube to hold the pumpkin in. One of the things I do know is SSD offers a portal kit that can be put onto this. Oh, I dropped a bearing. I don't recommend it. If the portal kit for this guy puts too much stress at these 3 screws, and it causes failures in the plastic differential because of the way the torque is applied. So if you are considering SSD housings with the SSD portal kit, I would look elsewhere. Look at different options. Axial 10-3 axles with those portals. There's a little bit. I think that those are going to be more durable. It's probably going to cost you less in the long run too. The SSD portal kit for this setup is, once you get all the stuff, is kind of pricey. But okay, so this is an M3x5. That should be these. I should have 6 total in here. There's 3. Oh, that one's shorter. Okay, I've got, counting screws. I've got 4 short screws and 4 longer screws. Nope, now I need the instructions. Okay. So it's 2. That makes the count wrong. I don't know where the other 2 go. Maybe they're extra. Oh, that's a different setup. All right, well, we'll just put them off to the side for the moment. So it's 2 M3x5s that go here and here and here and here. And in the bottom, nope, that's a lie. Oh, that's correct. Okay, I said it right. So it's 3x5 here and a 3x5 here. Oh, there's some good thunder. If you didn't hear the thunder right now, then I did a really good job on my mic getting rid of background noises, because I just had a pretty gnarly thunder hit outside. It was pretty nice. Didn't quite rattle the windows, but it was a good one. And then an M3x4 goes in this side right here, and only 2 of those, which means I will have 2 that must be used later on. Now, those do thread into the aluminum on the axle tubes in all 3 spots. So for that, because they thread into the aluminum, I am going to put a little bit of blue Loctite onto here to make sure that they stay in there and don't vibrate loose. It's always a good idea when you're putting screws into any sort of metal, and rather than wrenching them super tight, go a good cinch tight with a little bit of Loctite on there, and that'll make it easier to get them out in the future without ruining stuff and not having them come loose. That way you don't strip parts out along the way. There we go. And then the next one goes here. And that one does have some Loctite on it. I put a little too much on the first screw, so I grabbed this one and just wiped it onto the threads of this screw rather than wiping it onto the rag. Yep, Pro 44s, Neil. I considered doing diamonds, but I like the look of the Pro 44 better. I think it has a little bit more factory scale kind of look. Let's adjust this a little bit. There we go. I moved a whole bunch of stuff around, actually mostly today, with the cameras and the lighting to see if I could make things work and look a little bit better. That one was a little out of place. All right, those 2 are in, and then the M3x4 on the side where the diff cover is going to go. Not 100% sure. Oh, they just have a little bit thinner plastic on that side. That's why it's a little bit shorter of a screw. So if you put an M3x5 into this side of the housing, it would, you probably run the risk of that screw hitting the axle shaft. And then we're going to move to the other side, make sure I grab the right screw. Those look like they're the same length. All right, where is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, because these are so close in length, I'm going to grab my ruler and actually look. That's a 5. It's a 5. That's a 5. That's a 4. Okay. That makes me think I might have put 4 in one of the other spots. Oh, I'm a doofus. So when I turn the axle around, I put 1 here, but when I turned it around, instead of putting them on this side, I put them on that side. That would have probably thrown my count off a little bit. But we're going to back these out. I'm going to make sure that I put the right length in, because I was probably talking and not paying attention to which screw I actually grabbed. Okay, so that's definitely a 4 in that spot. So we'll put it right back in where it was. That's supposed to be a 4. Say that, but I didn't actually put it next to the 5. Yeah. It actually feels like these screws thread even into the nylon a little bit. So the Loctite that I'm actually putting on these is probably unnecessary, since they are threading into the nylon. The nylon's going to act a little of the center housing. It feels like they're biting as soon as they hit these threads in this hole. Well, there's no threads in that hole. It feels like it's cutting a little bit of threads in there. So that'll actually act kind of like the nylon on a lock nut, and will keep these from backing out. So the Loctite's probably not necessary. It doesn't say that Loctite's required in the instructions for these, at least not that I see. So an unnecessary precaution. Then we wanted to double check these other two. These are supposed to be 5s. Did I put 5s in there? Yep, that one's definitely a 5. So the question for you guys that are watching, anybody who was watching when the stream, when I first fired up the stream and it had the starting soon screen, was that something worth having, or was it better just to fire it up and go without that little 5-minute prequel that starts 5 minutes before the stream? I was looking at it and I was like, it's kind of a neat idea. I kind of like that. That way everything, and it gives me a chance to see that everything loads in right. But if it was more of an annoyance than a benefit, I won't, I'll pull it back off. All right. I just made sure that those other two I put in were the right length. And now I'm going to put the remaining 2 5mm screws into this part of the housing. Yeah, these are definitely biting into the plastic a little bit. So if you are doing these, Loctite's not necessary. Not a requirement. But as I say that, I still, because I did it on some of them, be consistent and put that little touch of Loctite on all of them. don't plan on taking this part back, taking this apart again. Um, this should be a more or less a permanent assembly right now, unless something gets broken, which by all means, at the point where something gets broken, this will no longer be my truck. It'll be someone else's truck. So drop the main carrier bearing in, or the main ring gear bearing. Maybe. I got it stuck in there. Of course I did. Well, it's definitely a better fit in this housing than it was the other housing. And that's, yeah, that's the right bearing. It's a tighter fit. I won't say better, a tighter fit. There we go. It just means it has to be aligned a little bit straighter. It won't, you can't rotate it into position. That one went there. That one in that side. And one more bearing to pull out of the old housing. If you don't have a bearing puller, there is a special tool out there you can get for pulling bearings that reaches in through the center hole, the ID of the bearing, and then it's got a little deal that you can tighten up on it and a little claws that'll expand out and hook the bearing so you can pull it out. I don't have one of those, so I generally will take just a small flathead or slung that one across the table. That's the risk of doing it this way, but I'll take a small flathead and I'll just put it on the inside lip and just kind of work the bearing around, applying pressure to all the sides evenly and see if I can get it to walk out. Um, it doesn't always work, but it usually works pretty good to do that. There are some other tricks. At some point, I might do a video on tricks for getting bearings out of housings, especially housings that you can't put, a tool through where a bearing's up against a closed face, and yeah, and you need a way to pop that out. There's some tricks for that, but we won't get into that in this video because I won't need to. But maybe in the future, if that's something that somebody might find helpful, let me know, and I'll put together a video on bearing removal methods. All right, now we're gonna drop the new carrier in, or not the new carrier. The carrier's not everything. Oh, need the pinion first. Pinion gear, and then the carrier. Drop right in nicely. And then we need to put the retainers in. So one thing I did notice on these retainers for the carrier group is that they are tapered. There is a taper right here on this side. You can kind of see it with the way the light's glaring off of here. This side's not tapered and this side is over here. Looking at the instructions, it goes how I would expect it. The non-taper side is the side that goes towards the center or against the main ring gear here, like such. So the tapered side on here is on this side. And then this one's going to be put on in the mirrored position. So which size screws? Those are M2.5 by 8, and I'm going to need 4 of them. We'll go to the trusty ruler. These won't need Loctite. They do thread into plastic. So I'll cap that, put it off to the side. And 2.5 by 8. That's an M3. That's an M3. I think. Nope, that's a 2.5. Yep. Yep. So it's going to be those. Looks like I got a spare one of those. Unless it gets used somewhere else. And just to verify on the ruler, again, so measuring socket head screws, which this is a really small one. But measuring, we'll use this button head. Whether it's a button head or a socket head style screw, the way you measure the length is from the bottom side of the head to the end of the thread. If it's a countersink screw, you measure it from the top of the head to the end of the thread. Tech tip of the day. All right, so I'll need 4 of these. Got 4. One. So I am going to start both of these before I put them all the way down. And then I'll kind of tighten them up going back and forth so that this retainer applies pressure evenly to both sides to the top of the bearing. That's probably not necessary. I don't know that the machine precision tolerance on this is that tight, but it's just a good practice anytime you're clamping bearings in, not to just load up all the pressure from one direction. Otherwise, you can cause it binding or a misalignment. Before I actually fully cinch that, I am going to cinch the other side in so that I don't overload the pressure on this end and keep that end from being able to seat down all the way. I don't know. Yeah, the instructions don't say anything about it being necessary to do this the way I'm doing it, but it is good practice. It helps prevent overstressing stuff when you're tightening things down, to do it in a progressive manner, I guess is a good way to put it. Because these are going into plastic, you don't want to over tighten them too much, just a good snug. Now I'll start going back and forth between the two sides, get it all seated nice and even. All right, one more time around. I think that one's all the way down. That one's all the way down. The bearing for the axle shaft dropped out again. All right, and there we go. Those are tightened all the way in. Thank. Yep. All right, there we go. So that's all tightened all the way in. Put a little bit of preload on the pinion, and that spins really nice. If I did a good job on the mic filters, there's a good chance you can't even hear the gears spinning at all. Now I can look at the audio feedback when I'm not talking, and it doesn't move at all, which means it's filtering that noise. But it's good. It sounds really nice. Let's see. Yeah, if I put it right next to the mic, you could hear it a little bit, I'm sure. All right, so the next step is going to be, we're going to do diff cover. I'm probably going to drop that same bearing out of the end of the axle tube another half dozen times before I stop picking it up and putting it back in. So again, the big difference aesthetically between these two diff covers is the tapered front right here on the bottom face of that one. So this one actually would be this way. Oh no, I have it the right way. And then it also has fewer screws along the bottom. That could be a trade-off that whoever ends up with this may want to keep an eye out on. if that end of that diff cover gets hung up on something and it tries to pull, maybe that would be an issue, but I highly doubt it. The axial diff cover is held on by 4 screws and it doesn't get pulled out. And on the inside of these, it does have, see, there you go. You can kind of see it. It's got these little circles right here in each for the 4 corners are key in over the top of where the 4 retaining bolts are for the bearing or the bearing retainers. So it should stay in there pretty good and line up and not have an issue. Oh, nice. Good to know, Neil. So Neil was said on the chat that he preferred the rock guard style cover and never had an issue with it getting hooked or pulling up on anything. So shouldn't be an issue. Good to know. All these little tiny screws I've got here are going to go in and hold the diff cover on. We should have a few extras left over by the time this is done, since there's enough to do the other diff cover. Now we just got to buzz these guys in. I was met up with a guy today that I traded some RC parts with. He was after a scale motor and transmission setup I had for a TF2, and we shot the shit for a little bit. And one of the things we talked about was tools that are used for RC, and he was telling me about how he just last week got a set of MIP wrenches and how much that made a difference in working on his RCs. And I can't exaggerate that enough. I've had my MIP driver set for a good while now, maybe 2 years, and I use them a lot. And there's no wear on the tips, and they just work really great. I know they're not exactly cheap, but if you're tired of fighting with little Allen wrenches or Allen wrenches stripping or stripping out your hex head screws, spend the money and get a set of MIPs. I can't exaggerate that enough. It'll be the best 45 bucks, 30, 40 bucks, depending on when you get them. And you get them on sale or whatnot, between 35 to 45 bucks for a set of MIPs, and which exact set you get. But the quality of the tool is fantastic, and it makes huge difference working on your RCs, working with a tool that's not stripping out your screws or rounding off the driver itself. I mean, every once in a while, you're still going to need your little angle Allen wrenches or a ball end to get to something. But for most stuff, like what we're doing here, just these MIP drivers are worlds better than anything I've used. So, and I mean, I can't recommend it enough. You can find them on Amazon. You can find them at A Main. There's probably a whole bunch of other retailers that have them. It hands down probably the best tools you can get for working on an RC. Cinch up this diff cover. What just popped up there? Oh yeah. Oh, so something Lance just mentioned is that you can order them direct from MIP, and I hadn't even thought about that. But yeah, I mean, I don't that seems like a great choice to me, and then you don't have to worry about stock or a third party retailer. Just go straight to the source and get a set of the best tools you can have. There we go. That diff cover is on. And there's what your Pro 44 axle diff cover or axle with diff cover. That's what the center section is going to look like. These outer ends are going to look a little bit different once I get the hubs on there. But I think that's going to have a great scale look under a scale class 1 build. And I'm fairly certain, like 99.9% certain, that there is a couple of aluminum diff cover options that you can get that can replace these plastic ones if you are looking to do an upgrade or get something that was a little bit more flashy for your scale look. So next on these, we got to shove the axle shafts in. So these are straight out of the other axle. And those just slide right in like butter. Perfect. But not the next part that actually has to go in. Good try. Good try. How long before someone says, hey, you're doing it wrong? Just a heads up. Anybody who's about to say, hey, you're doing it wrong, I caught myself before you caught me because of the delay. All right. So this one's got the panhard mount. Panhard on this chassis is going to be on the driver side. So the panhard mount C-hub needs to be on the passenger side. For now, I'm just going to do the caster angle just straight vertical, pretty close to straight vertical, only because I can't really set that until I have a chassis, or the chassis built with all the suspension and goodies and panhard and everything all in place, and then we can actually tune the alignment. We're just going to set it vertical for now. Now that bearing won't fall out anymore because the C-hub retains it. Oh, that one's lined up. That one's in. Now we can put the axle shafts in. And those drop right in perfectly. I'm going to drop that one out for now so I can not have to hold it. And we need this. Go. And I probably should have kept track of which screws I pulled out of that. Of course I didn't. Let's see. Well, shame on me. This is why it's a good idea to be a little bit more organized on your disassembly. Because I don't, well, none of these are the right screws to go in this, actually. Or if they are the right screws, shame on Axial for not having a shouldered screw. But my guess is this probably is supposed to have a shouldered screw that goes in there. And I didn't pull any shouldered screws out, which if I go back and I look at the video from last week or from the last round of the build on this, I'll probably find that I couldn't find shouldered screws then and just put something in to hold it. Yeah, that definitely has to have a shouldered screw or a bushing. So that's a part that's missing. I'll have to add that to the list, which means new C-hubs. I think we'll have to just do new C-hubs so that we can have some nice ones. But in the meantime, I'm going to throw these screws, which probably are what I put through in it last time, to just keep the assembly together until I can get the correct parts. If I would have been wise, I would have got those for this video, but clearly I forgot. All right, that one's hanging in there. And we pop that guy on. So again, for anybody who's watching or anyone who may have skipped ahead and missed what I just said a few minutes ago or a minute or two ago, the C-hubs need to either have a bushing or a shouldered screw. The screws I just put in there are not the right screws to hold that together. I know that, and that'll be on the parts list for the next round of upgrades. Because if you don't have a shouldered screw in here, right? So if this isn't a shouldered screw right there, and the one right here on the bottom, if those aren't shouldered screws or have the appropriate bushings in them, that C-hub is going to wobble all over the place. One, this is going to make your truck drive terrible. And two, it's going to tear up parts pretty bad. It's going to eat up a lot of parts here in the front end if you don't have the right stuff in there. So this is something I'm definitely going to have to get a replacement for. And rather than just getting the replacement hardware, I will get some fancy new parts. We'll put maybe new knuckles and new C-hubs onto this axle to cap it out. But that completes the front axle housing swap from the original AR44 to the new SSD housing, and it's all the same internals. So now that the front is reassembled, minus needing to rebuild those parts, and the link mounts will also be on the list of parts. As you can see, let me pop this one in there. Wrong way. That would be why. The stock axial link mounts do go right into this housing without issue. They line up just fine. These ones are just a little beat up, and I don't want to reuse them, so I'm not gonna actually bolt them on here. I'll get some nice new replacements to make this axle complete with a whole bunch of good new stuff. All right, we'll get the front out of the way, and we'll move on to the rear. So the rear housing, which came with its own set of instructions, but is also on the set of instructions that came out of the first package. So that tells you how many of the parts are interchangeable or how similar the two axles are. Before I get the rear out, I am going to take the rest of this hardware. This long screw you may have seen that came with this housing is a new link screw for up here in the top for your upper links. I'm sure it said that in the instructions. I didn't look to see where, but just from looking at it and knowing what's here, it's quite obvious that's what it's for. So, and I'm not going to put it all the way in right now. I don't want to pre-thread any of that more than I have to. And since I'm not actually putting any links on, there's no reason to actually run that all the way through. And then the rest of this little hardware that came with this axle, including the spare diff cover, will get baggied up to be included with the truck when the giveaway happens. Get these junk out of the way. And we'll move on to the rear axle housing. Now, again, the axle housing that I just assembled will work in the front or the rear with that set of parts that's there, depending on whether or not you use the knuckles or the rear lockouts. This housing axle kit, on the other hand, will only work on the rear. It will not work as a front. I will show you why in just a minute. Let me get my hardware, get my baggies opened up. Again, brand new out of the package stuff. Come on. Axial default is shouldered screws. Okay, good to know, Lance. Thank you. I appreciate that. So for those who may not have noticed that in the chat from Lance, the default from Axial of what should be in right here, in order to make that not happen, is a shouldered screw. So I do have some shouldered screws. I know I highly doubt I have the right shouldered screws, but I do have some, so I can at least show you what one should look like. If I can figure out which bin they're in. That one. 2 strikes. Let's see if I can go not go 3 and out. Shouldered. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Did not go 3 and out. Moving a non-shouldered screw is what this looks like. This is just a normal M3 screw, and it's got threads all the way up to the head. A shouldered screw for what would go in that axle component looks like this. Let's see if I can get this to focus a little. So you can see how there's threads, and then there's a big step up, what looks like a bushing on there. That's actually part of the screw, and that's a shoulder. So what happens when you put it into that C-hub is you tighten it down until it hits the bottom of the shoulder, and that's what allows the screw to get tight. The length of the shoulder is greater than the thickness of the plastic right up here at the top, so it doesn't actually pinch the C-hub and allows the C-hub to pivot nice and smooth on the shoulder of the screw. So that's what's supposed to be in there. It is very important that you have a shouldered screw or a bushing. There's bushing types and there's shouldered screw type. That both can work. I do recommend that with the axial stuff, just get the axial shouldered screws, because then you know that the shoulder is the right size. If that's really not an option, you can find a bushing or make a bushing, but the ID of the bushing needs to be appropriate for a 3mm screw. The OD of the bushing needs to be appropriate for the size of the ID, or the inside diameter of the hole on the C-hub, with enough play that the C-hub will actually turn without binding, but not so much that it wobbles. And then the height, how tall the shoulder is, has to be the right height too. So it's a lot more complicated to come up with your own or track down your own when you can just get the right ones from Axial. So that's what I would recommend, is just get the right screws from Axial if you're trying to do that, or whatever brand of axle you have that issue with, that you need to resolve this, whether it's worn out bushings or you lost a shoulder screw. Go back to that manufacturer's list of hardware and get the right stuff from the manufacturer for shouldered screws, because there's a gazillion different size options and mixes for that type of stuff, and it can be really hard, and some of them are uniquely custom to manufacturers and not a standard piece of hardware that you can just find anywhere. All right, moving into this rear specific housing. First, I'll show you that the carrier, or the differential for this housing, or the pumpkin, I should say, not the differential. The pumpkin is exactly the same. This part is interchangeable with the center housing here. They're literally 100% identical, no difference. The actual diff covers are exactly the same diff covers, and they're interchangeable as well. The bearing retainers, exactly the same for the carrier group. Where the difference is in these guys right here. That's just a cap. This is your axle bearing, outer bearing retainer on the axle, which is held in by a screw here on the top and here on the bottom. So you'll notice, unlike the front axle, which had these, can't really see it very well. Let me get the light where, there we go. You can see all the little grooves and notches on here for lining up your C-hub, or on a rear axle for keying in what's called the lockout, which holds the outer axle bearing. On these SSD specific rear axles, that whole lockout section out here is eliminated. It's replaced by just this bearing cap right here, and that's it. the stub axle will stick out the end. So it narrows down the size of the tube. It's going to give us a lot more scale look than the stock axle will. And again, these are aluminum tubes. They are just unique to being a rear axle only. All right. So let's get the assembly going on this guy. We'll get the front out of the way. And before I can actually assemble this one, I need to get the parts out of the old axle. So the first thing we will do here is we will pull the lockouts off. I'll probably just leave the link mounts on this housing because we're not going to use them. So this will come out. One of the things you do have, and you can see just like the front housing from the axial, the housing itself are identical. The center sections are identical front and rear. It's just what gets put on this outer side that determines whether it's a front or a rear, which is either a C-hub or a lockout. So I mean, you could literally get this same setup that had the grooved in axles and put the lockouts on, and it's a rear axle. You don't have to get the rear specific. I just think the rear specific looks better. One thing that you will notice a difference is the rear on the standard axial housing has a bearing here, and it also has another bearing out here where it seats into the end of the lockout. The SSD specific housing, rear end specific housing, eliminates one of those bearings. Those two are the exact same bearing, but the SSD specific housing here in the end only uses one bearing. So that's actually going to reduce the number of bearings required, which if you're ever doing a bearing replacement, then that's 2 less bearings you have to replace. Unlike shouldered screws, bearings are, well, a lot of bearings used in this RC stuff, they are standard bearings. So you don't have to go to an OE bearing menu or a parts, an axial OE bearing option to get replacement bearings if you need to replace them. You can just measure, there's 3 measurements on a bearing that matter, which is the inside diameter, the how big this opening is, the outside diameter, how big it is across, and then the thickness, how wide is the bearing. For any standard bearing, those are the only 3 that you need, those 3 dimensions, and you can order bearings from literally anywhere and you can get a bearing that will fit. That said, for convenience and ease of getting, say, a full bearing kit, going with something like a Fast Eddie's bearing kit or the TR something rather, SC, RC, whatever it was, bearing kit that I put in this truck. Going with the convenience that you have with that is you can just go to their website or a retailer of their products and just get a preset collection of bearings for the whole thing, which does make it nice and easy for getting a full set of bearings. And the prices usually aren't too bad. You're not going to pay too much more or too much less for bearings out of those complete kits versus if you were to go piece your own kit together, you're going to pay a very similar amount in cost for the bearings. So the only time I would say that it's justified to track down a bearing on your own is if you need one. But usually if you've had one bearing seize up in your truck, there's probably a good chance that other bearings are getting to where they're aged and old and going to need replacement anyways. And bearing kits aren't that expensive. So you have a bearing seize up, just do all the bearings in that component at minimum, if not do a full bearing job on the whole rig. I think if I remember right, a fast eddy bearing kit for an SCX 10's 25, 30 bucks, and you get all the bearings. It might even be less than that. Okay, that out, pinion out, and the pinion the outside. And that's it. The two remaining bearings that are in this housing, I'll end up popping out later and putting into a miscellaneous baggie of good bearings because we no longer need them. And we will reassemble the new one. So I'm going to do this one in a little bit different order. I'm going to put the differential together internally. And then I'll put the axle tubes on. There we go. That's seated in. And then we need the outside. And that's in. Then the retainers. And the four 2.5 by 8 mil screws. Check that out. I remember it off the top of my head. Now the real question will be whether or not I end up pulling ring and pinions out again before this truck goes away to do an overdrive option. I haven't decided whether or not that's going to be something we put into this truck. If you, the viewer, if you were to be receiving this truck, would you prefer it to have overdrive or prefer it to not have overdrive? The benefits of having overdrive are is going to be a little bit better overall performance as far as how well it climbs, how well it turns. Um, it is going to make it perform better. The downsides to overdrive in the front end is it's going to wear tires a little bit more, and it's going to be a little bit harder on gears and a little bit more heat and a little bit more load in the motor because the front wheels have to spin faster than the rear wheels, so it's constantly breaking traction. Uh, so if it was something that was being used as a straight just cruise it along the hiking trails while you're out for a walk, a little overdrive's not necessarily ideal. But if you were thinking, hey, I'd probably want to be able to crawl something a little bit more aggressive, then overdrive is a good thing. So undecided. If I was building it for myself to keep it, I would want a little bit of overdrive in it. Oh, backtracking a little bit because I didn't notice the comment right away, but Lance mentioned that a fast eddy bearing kit, which is great bearings for an AR44 axle, is $14. So if you have a bearing go bad in an AR44 axle, spend the 14 bucks and get a full axle bearing kit from Fast Eddy and just replace them all. Then you get the right size. That's not expensive at all, and they're good quality. They're like the go-to bearings for RC. Wow, I really don't like this ring and pinion. So this, because of the way this, I wonder if I don't have it seated all the way. Actually, you know what? This is probably the same one that sounded a little bit yucky before when I put it together the first time. But let's see if I can get this to come through on the mic. So I think you were able to hear that a little bit. It was triggering the audio meter on the screen, so I think you were able to hear it. But it these gears just they aren't meshing well. It's not. It I don't know what make this ring and pinion is. It's a one piece carrier with the ring gear, not typical of what I have seen in axial stuff, and I just don't like it. So because this is not a good, clean, smooth mesh, this ring and pinion is going to be getting replaced one way or another. So the question is, do I overdrive this or do I not overdrive it because I'm going to need a ring and pinion? And cost of going overdrive versus non-overdrive is about the same. So I will hopefully I'll leave that up to the. I think maybe it's just not seated all the way. If I put pressure on it, it's a lot smoother. But I'll get a new ring and pinion just because I don't want that to be an issue. I don't recognize these parts and I don't like it. Uh, but so overdrive versus no overdrive is going to be what it boils down to. And hopefully, maybe I'll get some feedback on the videos. Maybe I'll put a poll out on the 10th scale Facebook page and see what if I can get some feedback there and put a little bit of the viewers input into this build. All right, so the carrier group is in. And know that crunchiness is not because of a lack of grease. There's more than enough on there for that kind of movement. A little bit more probably wouldn't hurt, but it's not a lack of lubrication. So now put the diff cover on. Yeah, I think I will. I think I'll do a poll on the 10 scale Facebook page for overdrive versus no overdrive in a C1 trail truck semi, you know, occasional local comp use. That way, it's not a diehard comp build, but something that the you might take to a local comp to have some social fun. See if we can find out which is better. Oh, the Vanquish underdrive in the rear. I've heard actually, Lance. I have heard that before that the SSD overdrive was not a great gear set. It just didn't between whether it's meshing not well or just not durable enough and not holding up well. It's not the first time I've heard that about the SSD set. I hadn't thought about doing the Vanquish underdrive though. I do like the idea of doing that. Maybe we'll get that gear set for the back of this. The other one that I would consider that I really like the design of, and I'm running it in the 3D printed truck right here. In the front axle of that truck is the Boom Racing overdrive gear set, which it's only a um, three bolts to hold the ring gear onto the carrier, but the bolts actually only do the sandwiching because the ring gear is got a triangular cutout in the back of it that seats over the carrier. So got a whole lot of twist engagement so that the bolts aren't actually taking any of the shearing load. I know one of the common reasons to upgrade to the Vanquish ring and pinion gear, whether it's the overdrive, the underdrive, or the standard ratio, is for the 6 bolt option that they offer so that it can help withstand from the twist loads that breaks off the standard 3 bolt version. But the underdrive, I've never used one, so this sounds like a perfect excuse to get one. and put just one more really nice component into this truck. All right. So the diff cover is on. Again, for the rear axle, I did the matching diff cover with the little rock guard on the bottom of it. So that which I probably could have, bolted together in front of the camera and made that more entertaining, but I wasn't paying attention. Typical. But yeah, so at this point, the center section of this axle and the front axle are literally identical. You could just interchange them and everything would go together exactly the same. And now we're going to put the axle tubes on. Again, this is going to have the 3 bolts that hold the axle tube on. So Lance is saying, for me, the pinion rubbed in the spool in the SSD overdrive. Yeah, I could see that. I wonder, that might be what's going on with this one that I've got in this housing. I said I don't know who the make is. It's probably one of the clones. I don't know, an Endura or something, or a hot racing part or something like that. It's not one I recognize and has no markings on it. But I could see that might be what's causing the extra noise in that. So, and no issues with the Vanquish and your Forerunner, smooth. Well, yeah, that's typical of the Vanquish products. They're fucking awesome. I will. There's no doubt that in these beautiful pieces that I have now, that I will be running Vanquish internals in those, because how much of a shame would it be to take beautiful Vanquish axles and put non-Vanquish internals in them? I would have to, I'd have to cry a little bit when nobody was looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the instructions again real quick, just to, I remember. So it was 2 5 mils on this side and this side, M3x5, and then on the front sides an M3x4. And even if you don't have the instructions, the way you can tell is let's see, there's more plastic right here on the seat where that one goes than there is right here on the seat of where that one goes. So there's less material here, therefore that's where the shorter screw goes. And to be consistent with how I built the front axle, again, I don't think it's necessary, but I am going to put a little bit of Loctite on each one of these because I did it on the front. So at least I will do it consistent. I need to sort out the 5s versus the 4s. That's definitely a 5. There's a 4. There's a 4. Don't need that. Those are 5s. All right, that's enough. That's definitely a 5. 5. And those are 4s. And that's 4. Okay, now that those are sorted, we can put them in. We'll do the 4 mil first. Four mil goes on the side with the diff cover, as I was saying. Again, you do need to make sure that when you're putting these in, that you do line the axle tube up with the holes in the diff cover, because these 3 holes in the, or not the diff cover, but these 3 holes in the pumpkin housing do need to line up with the holes that are in the axle tube itself, because those holes are threaded. You're not just pinching against the metal, you're actually going into a threaded hole. So just a tip, make sure that those are lined up. Again, for Loctite, and I literally just put, that's it. I don't even know if I can make that visible. No, I don't think you can see just that little glint of light off the end. I mean, there's just a touch of Loctite on there. And for any hardware that's this small, that's more than enough Loctite. You don't have to coat the threads. Okay, that one's in. One more, and this axle tube is attached. Okay. So I think overall we're doing all right on time. Should be able to have both of these axles complete. Another 15 minutes or so, and this one should be about done. And we'll have completed the first round of upgrades for this truck. We'll do the 4 mil long one first because it's the important one that doesn't go in too far. Touch of Loctite on there. It goes again, the 4 mil goes on the side from the diff cover where there's less material on the seat. Loctite. Neil, I second the underdrive. If you want the overdrive, I would get the hot racing gears with the Vanquish spool. The hot racing gears with the Vanquish spool. That's a good. That's not a bad idea. What makes? Is there a reason the hot racing gear over the Vanquish gears? Is it just price? I do know that the Vanquish spool is a really nice piece, so I can totally understand getting that regardless. All right, axle tube is in. Oh, Vanquish only makes an underdrive. Interesting. I did not know that. Well, then that would be a good reason to not get the Vanquish overdrive because it doesn't exist. See, I learned something new today. And actually, Lance, messing with this after you said it, if I pull on this pinion just a little bit, put a little bit of outward pressure on it and spin it, it's nice and smooth. So it is this pinion is just barely rubbing on the spool itself, creating that little bit of binding, which that could be solved with a shim behind the drive shaft, a bearing shim behind the drive shaft to give it that little bit of thrust pressure and make that work nice and smooth. But seeing that we're probably going to put a Vanquish underdrive in that, then I'm sure that will solve the problem as well. All right, so once you have the axle tubes on with this rear end specific housing, um, oh, okay. So the hot racings are their machine well, and 6 bolt. Yep, that's sounds good enough to me. Have you, Neil? Have you seen the Boom Racing AR-44 gear set? I mean, not that I'm trying to encourage those over the hot racing ones so much, but I was just curious if you've seen the way they're keyed together. Oh, that's also a good note. Neil mentions that Vanquish actually includes a shimming set to shim the pinion so that it prevents it from getting into the spool. Uh, I know that that's something I've had to do on all of my TF2s is actually shim the pinions so that the pinion and ring gear mesh is appropriate. But okay, so on this rear end specific, once you actually get this housing put together, one bearing in the end, and then just a retainer cap that's held in place with two screws, and then the axle shaft. No, wrong, wrong. This is why I should have looked at the instructions. Axle shaft first. So bearings out, axle shaft goes in, then the bearing goes on, and then the retainer cap goes on. So the reason it goes in that order is inside this axle shaft, the bearing needs to sit against this face. But if you try and put the axle in last, the bearing sits way out here against this face, where it would be if you had the lockouts in this housing. So it's axle shaft in first, then the outer bearing, and then the retainer cap. And then 2 and 3 screws. These ones do go into the metal housing, and if I'm not, and they fall right through the plastic. There's no way it's going to thread into that plastic at all. They just go right through there. So these ones definitely need a little bit of Loctite on them to keep them in properly. So yeah, the boom racing one, I have one. I got one purely out of curiosity because of the design of it. Um, if you wanted a gear set to have as a backup set at least to have around, not uh, it would be it's a good set. They're pretty tough. I haven't broken one ever. Granted, I only have one, and it's in that 3D printed truck, which you've seen what I've done to that quite a few times, and it's running a portal gear set on it too, that has seen a lot of abuse in some whatever off-brand axles because I was building that as cheap as I could possibly do it to see if it would work. But it's got the boom racing overdrive in it, and it's a really nice setup. The way it's engineered, and I actually think someone did put some engineering effort into it. It works really well, and it eliminates the need to have 6 bolts because the bolts don't carry the shear load on them. So if you're looking for another option or another something rather to have in the box, it's not a bad choice whatsoever. All right. Then once those 2 screws are on that hold the bearing retainer in, that side's complete. Now we can do the other side. Again, that's axle shaft first, no bearing yet, and then the outer bearing, and then the retainer. And that's it. Then we just get that lined up with the 2 holes, put the 2 bolts in, and this axle is complete. Touch Loctite. Way too much. Squeezed out too much Loctite. There we go. If you put too much Loctite on a screw, don't just go with it. Wipe some of it off. You'll thank yourself later on down the road when you have to take a truck back apart that you didn't just assemble something with too much Loctite because it'll make your life difficult. Just not worth it. A lot easier to just grab the rag or the shop towel or whatever, wipe a little bit of that Loctite off. Doesn't make a mess that way, and a lot less painful down the road if you have to do anything that requires that screw to come back out. So there we go. That's the rear end specific housing fully assembled. It looks fantastic. Remember, we had that verse. Slide the lockouts back on here. Got a screw in it. There we go. Come out of there, you son of a gun. Now, mind you, I'm just throwing these lockouts on. I'm not doing any alignment with them because they're not completely pointless at this point. It's just for aesthetic comparison. But you can see here's the difference in your AR44 rear axle versus an SSD Pro 44 rear specific axle. And the overall look of this axle is just, the SSD is just worlds better in overall look. I mean, the scale looks better. The durability is going to be better. It's got aluminum axle tubes. The overall retainer setup for your carrier group is better. Um, it just all around, it's a nicer setup, and it's 25 bucks to take this, what we had, this rear axle, and turn it into this SSD rear axle is $25. That's a $25 upgrade that we just did that changes the look of these axles completely. I mean, combined front and rear, this conversion setup, and not only does it look worlds better, but it's way better in as far as your weight distribution because of the more weight. The scale look is so much better, and this is a $50 upgrade for your AR44s. So if you're looking for an upgrade that's going to change the overall look of your truck, this is a great upgrade on a budget, and these are really nice parts. I mean, they're not your high-end Vanquish parts, which can, courtesy of Neil, I can grab one of these. It's not this housing. That's a fully machined aluminum housing, one-piece setup with the removable third member. It's not this level of quality or durability, but it's only one step below that. And this part right here, as far as quality and durability and performance, is really close in comparison, or as close as you can get to having that really expensive fully CNC setup without spending the cost of getting that setup. And it's an easy conversion. It's a direct bolt-on swap for your SCX 10.2. I highly recommend it to anyone who's got an SCX 10.2 and trying to step up in the scale game a little bit. These Pro 44s are they're a great looking axle setup. So, and like I said, I know they offer um, there's other diff covers you can get to make it look a little bit different. I don't know how many other ones. I just know that there are a couple of other ones you can get to change up the scale look a little bit, or put an aluminum one on there. I won't do that with this just because I think the matte black on there looks good, and the plastic on there is going to be good and durable. But yeah, and then this one's got a little bit of scale hardware or not scale hardware, but a little extra hardware that'll go with it. So yeah, there's our axles. We are still going to need to do C hubs, knuckles and C hubs on the front axle. We'll upgrade those. And then the rear axle, we're probably going to do that underdrive we've been talking about from Vanquish. I think that the more I've been thinking about that throughout this video, I think that's going to be a great choice. Yeah, and I mean, I did have a picture of the transmission in a pile of parts in the teaser for this video, but I think we'll save that disaster for another video. We're an hour and 45 minutes in this one, and I just don't feel like messing around with that right now. And I also don't have any replacement parts for it other than new bearings to put in it. I don't know that it needs replacement parts. I don't think so. I think it's mostly complete. But we'll just save that for another video because I'm also not 100% sure that we're going to keep a 10.2 3-gear trans in this chassis. So that's TBD what we're going to do there. So we'll leave that for next time. Neil, I've broken a center, but they are like 12 bucks to replace the centers. Oh, broke a center housing. So yeah, Neil is saying that he broke one of the nylon housings on these axles, and the that a replacement's like $12. So I mean, talk about a really cheap replacement part if you do have to replace it. And as you can see, they're not hard to work with. And if you had to replace just the center housing, and it's 6 bolts to take the axle tubes off, and then pull the diff cover and gut it and put it into a new one. So, Neil, Lance, not now. If you get the TGH brass, are you talking? Um, I don't know what you're talking about, Lance. Uh, I'm not sure. Oh, the brace. Oh, I know. I know which one you're talking about. It's the one you put on your you put that brace on your Forerunner. So the T I don't know, how does that attach to the axles? That brace, does it attach to the differential, the bolts that hold the Team Garage Hack makes a brace for the diamonds at least. Okay, I'll have to look up the brace for the diamonds and see. Oh, bolts to the link mounts. Well, if it bolts to the link mounts, then it should that TGH brace should work on the Pro 44 too. Then, yeah, because if it's not actually attaching to the center section of the axle at all, then there's no reason it shouldn't work with the Pro 44 versus the uh, the diamond housing. So again, the diamond housing looks a lot like, oh, well, actually, I can show you exactly what a diamond housing looks like because I have one. There you go. Here we go. So those who are interested, this is so we just built the Pro 44. This is an SSD diamond. So the axle tubes and everything are exactly the same. It's just the center section that's different. The diamond, instead of using a front load with a diff cover, uses a third member, a removable third member, to pull the internals out. So this is your SSD diamond versus your SSD Pro 44. If you have AR44 axles, the kit to go to either the diamond or the Pro 44 is the same price. That conversion is the same price between either one of them. Neil, I hate to bring it up, but these axles were the ones that I got off you a while back that I still haven't finished building the truck that these are going on. So, that's how good I'm doing on my projects. And that was a while ago. So in the brace, if the brace works on this housing, comparing the two in hand, the all the mounting points between the two housings are identical. The only spot that I see that's a little, just a hair bit different in material around it is this bolt right here versus this one right here. The molded plastic around where those bolts are is a little bit different shape. But I don't see any reason, if that brace doesn't attach right there, then there's not going to be an issue at all. And even if it does attach at those bolts, the Pro 44 actually looks like it has more space around those than the SSD Diamond does. Bolts to the link. Yeah, okay. So if it goes to the link mount, like I said, if it goes to the link mounts, then it should be no issue whatsoever. Don't. Oh man, I think I followed that whole conversation appropriately. Well, I think that that's pretty much a wrap for what we're going to run on this build tonight. I need to get some more parts in. I'll do, yeah, I definitely need to order up some parts for the next round of this build and make some decisions. One of the things that I'm really torn about, and I think that this is going to have to be done on a Facebook poll as well. See if I can get some feedback on what people might want to see on this build if they were to get their hands on it. But I kind of leaning towards doing a set of pro builds, 1.9 pro build wheels. Again, not that I'm trying to tout the Boom Racing brand over any other brand, but I don't have any of those pro build wheels yet. And I really like the idea of the versatility in how the wheel can be assembled at so many different offsets and configurations. And they've got some really neat center sections on it for those wheels. So I'd like to try out a set. So we may have to do a poll about which ones to get. I definitely won't be doing the extra wides because they've got some extra wides options that they're not appropriate for a class 1. So I'll be getting the standard width wheel, but there's, as far as what centers to get and what colors, that might be a talking point. I think I may have narrowed down what body I'm going to run, but we'll save that until next time. Maybe I'll even have it so we can start working on link geometry. So it will, only hint there is it will be something around a 12.3 wheelbase just to keep this semi-universal for whoever it's going to go to, because none of my other trucks are anything common. And if someone was to buy them, they'd have to know how to do a lot of custom work to replace stuff on them or make stuff fit properly. But anyhow, thanks everybody for tuning in. Neil, huge shout out again. I'm excited for these axles. I now need to pick a chassis that I'm going to go with for a true comp build, which is an extremely difficult decision. What I can say is it won't be a G-Speed. I'm torn between maybe a Brazen or the NSWC chassis. So that's a tough decision. But now I don't think I have a choice but to actually build a real comp truck now. So I think that's pretty awesome. Again, thank you very much for that. That's just going to make nationals that much better. Yeah. All right, man. Thanks guys for dropping in on the chat. It was a lot of fun having you guys hang out and BS a little bit. Hope this was entertaining. Hope I showed some people some really nice parts, some good options that you can do on a budget for some really good stuff. And until the next one, we'll see you next weekend. I don't know what the topic's going to be yet. Hopefully I can get that posted a little bit earlier. Oh, a crawl space contender. I can't do a contender. That's what Jake has. Which one do you have, Neil? Which chassis? That's going to take a few seconds before this actually gets to you and then gets back to me on a comment. So we'll have to wait a second for you to get back to me. I'm afraid, but I don't know if I want to do the same chassis just because I'm a weirdo and like to do different stuff. But at the same time, it would be cool to do the same platform because then we can share stuff back and forth. Oh, you do have the contender. Got it. Okay, that's more encouragement to get a contender. Okay, so good chance I'm going to get a contender chassis to put those Vanquish axles under. All right. We'll catch you guys next weekend. I don't know what it's going to be on yet, but I'll try and have something posted earlier in the week. This last week was a bit chaotic with work and I was busy most of the weekend. So I didn't even get the link up for the video until an hour before the video. So next week I'll do better. Until then, everybody have a great week. Get out, do your RC, have a good time. And hit me up on the Facebook page if you've got ideas for this custom build that you think would be great. That's 10 Scale Adventures on Facebook. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down here somewhere. Wait, no, if I'm looking at the screen, it should be down here somewhere on this side of the screen. Hit that like and subscribe button. Leave me some comments. Let me know what you think, and we'll catch you on the next one.